Al Jazeera's coverage on Israel and the war in Gaza will not be affected by a shutdown order issued by the government of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Well, that's according to the channel's Arabic managing editor Mohamed Moawad. The measure issued on Sunday excludes closing all Al Jazeera's offices in Israel, confiscating broadcast equipment, cutting off the channel from cable and satellite companies, and blocking its websites as long as the war continues. It did not mention Al Jazeera's Gaza operations.
We strongly condemn and denounce this criminal act that violates human rights and the basic right to access of information. Al Jazeera affirms its right to continue to provide news and information to its global audiences. Israel's direct targeting and killing of journalists, arrests, intimidation, and the threats will not deter Al Jazeera from its commitment to cover, whilst more than 140 Palestinian journalists have been killed since the beginning of the war on Gaza. The network vehemently rejects the allegations presented by Israeli authorities suggesting professional media standards have been violated.
Well, SABC News correspondent Sarah Coates joins us now to give us the latest in the Middle East. Sarah, there are a number of bases to cover. What we know, of course, is that more than 1 million people have sought refuge in Rafah. How then is this evacuation by Israel going to work, given the situation that we know in the north of Gaza, and of course how most of Gaza has, as some officials have said, been decimated?
Yes, hello. Well, this is certainly going to be a very complicated operation. We've already seen pictures coming in of people using whatever they can to try and get out of the eastern part of Rafah. Families using donkey carts, people with vehicles piled with mattresses, and also relatives sitting on the bonnet, sitting on the boot, just trying to get out. Now, we are hearing that there's absolute panic on the ground, given that people say that they were told to go to this area in Rafah some months ago, with the military calling it a humanitarian zone, a safe zone. But these people are now being forced to flee once again, and they say there is simply no safe place left for them to go in the Gaza Strip. Now, medics on the ground say over the past 24 hours, at least 26 people, including 11 children, have been killed in Rafah due to Israeli airstrikes. And this is certainly really going to complicate humanitarian efforts as well, given that the Kerem Shalom crossing you mentioned there in that intro is now closed after this rocket attack yesterday by Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which killed 4 Israeli soldiers. That death toll has gone up over the past hour or so and wounded some 10 other people. Now, we have heard from Hamas with this evacuation order in place to the east of Rafah. It says that this is a dangerous escalation which will have consequences, saying that this will not be a picnic for Israeli forces. Now, Israel is planning to use extreme force. That's what we've heard from the IDF in the east of Rafah, telling these people to get out now while they can and go to Al-Mawasi, which is an area down in the south but on the Mediterranean Sea, and also to Khan Yunis, which is a little further north of Rafah.
Let's then talk about, the talks that are currently ongoing to end this war. I mean, there is growing pessimism, as we've earlier said, over the prospects of an imminent ceasefire in Gaza. The talks largely, of course, being described as elusive. Now, this is, of course, as Benjamin Netanyahu also has vowed that Israel will not agree to Hamas's demands. The question then is, and it remains, I mean, are these talks genuine? And how likely are we to see a ceasefire anytime soon?
Well, at this hour, it does appear pretty unlikely given what's happening down in Rafah, although a number of these parties, such as Hamas, also the Qataris and the Americans, say that talks are ongoing. Now, there are reports that the CIA director, Bill Burns, that he's right now in Qatar having talks with senior Qatari officials, and he may actually land here in Israel a little later today, meeting the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, in Jerusalem to really try and see these talks talks, see them from not collapsing. But certainly at this hour, with this military operation seemingly imminent in Rafah, it does appear as though these talks are over for now. But we've heard from officials in the Israeli establishment and also Hamas. They are both trading blame for what appears to be a breakdown of these talks. Israel's Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, he says that Israel agreed to significant concessions for these talks to go ahead, but says Hamas is the one that really stopped it from happening by demanding this full comprehensive ceasefire. Now, we've also heard from Hamas's Politburo chief, Ismail Haniyeh. He says that it's Netanyahu that really stood in the way of these talks progressing, saying that he will go into Rafah with or without a deal. So certainly it really does appear as though these ceasefire and hostage negotiations are on their last legs. But of course, these mediators that have been working just so hard over the past few weeks, they're really trying to now salvage what they can.
All right, Sarah, as we close our conversation, and, I want to ask you this last question, which also segues nicely into my next interview. I mean, for the past 7 months or so, we've seen how the world has essentially been glued to their screens, searching for credible information in as far as this particular war is concerned. How then does the ban of Al Jazeera, or certainly some of its bureaus, been viewed on the ground there in Tel Aviv?
Well, when this was announced yesterday, people were in shock. We do understand, we do know that the Al Jazeera team that was based in East Jerusalem, that they've now moved to Ramallah. So this certainly shouldn't affect their broadcasting, but it just means that they're not going to be able to be broadcasting from Israel for at least 45 days. We do know that this 45-day closure, it is temporary, but it can be renewed. So what we certainly can expect potentially while this ground operation is ongoing down in Rafah is the Israelis to potentially keep this ban, maybe roll it over again and stop Al Jazeera from actually broadcasting here in Israel. But certainly they are still allowed to broadcast, but right now from the West Bank and of course also from Gaza. But we have heard from Germany's foreign ministry, it came out to say that this is a dark day for the media, adding that it sends the wrong signal. But Israeli officials, they say that Al Jazeera posed a threat to Israeli security, with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, calling it an incitement channel. Now, we do have a statement also from the Al Jazeera media network there in Qatar. It says this is a dangerous and ridiculous lie, and it puts the safety of our journalists at risk. So certainly this is being viewed pretty badly here in Israel, given that the Israelis constantly call themselves the only democracy in the Middle East.
All right, Sarah, thank you so much for that update. Let's leave it there for now. Sarah Coates reporting live there for us from Tel Aviv.